All right, so I did those recordings. Actually recorded kind of a dry run. Uh, Looked at the footage, adjusted kind of the frame a little bit so that I was better framed in the shot, and then I recorded it again. So I did have to go through 2 times sort of the amount of coffee and ingredients and stuff. Maybe sort of pantomime your first run through rather than using any ingredients or supplies that you have a limited amount of. It's really helpful to sort of watch through that first take. Also to kind of lock in my mind kind of the order in which things should happen in the final video. So I think it's fairly successful. So now I'm going to take that raw footage and I'm going to edit it. When you are starting this post-production process, the best thing for a good, smooth post-production process of editing and making everything sort of ready for final sort of viewing is to start out with something good. So a couple things that I would really like to sort of call your attention to is shooting in the highest quality that you can. That shooting with the rear camera, which is able to shoot in 1080 HD, like pretty high resolution. It's also good to to have sort of the video be as close to kind of like what you want it to be as possible, so that you're not having to move things around too much after the fact. I usually tend to let things just go longer rather than cut, because when you are sort of stitching together a bunch of separate cuts, that can actually be more complicated and confusing if there's overlap, or there's areas where there is no overlap, where there's a gap sort of in a process. That can also be confusing. So usually I have a tendency to, if something goes wrong, I just stop and I don't do anything, so it's real obvious that there's a cut there. And then I pick it back up after sort of a beat or two, allow myself to collect myself for a moment. And it's easier to remove that air than to stitch together a bunch of like multiple takes that are just sort of partial takes. So we're going to dig into the editing process now. All right, so I've kind of sped up this editing process a little bit, so I'm gonna sort of just narrate over the top of it. So what I did, this whole sort of editing process probably took me about 10 minutes. I got the video onto my computer by uploading it to Google Drive and then pulling it down off of Google Drive onto my laptop. On my laptop, I'm just using QuickTime Player, which is like a very, very simple video player and also video editing program. Very rudimentary video editing capabilities, but perfect for what I needed for this. So you can see I'm just like watching through parts of it over and over again, and making sure that that sort of the places where I've cut are exactly what I want, where I want to cut. And you can see that I'm like, so as I'm kind of like deciding where to make a second cut here. I've already trimmed off the beginning and the end of the clip. There's options in the edit menu to just trim, but now I'm splitting the clip. I'm actually cutting, making sort of a cut on either side of an area that I want to remove, because I want to remove this spot where I moved the camera. I think that might be disorienting for people who are watching the video. So I'm splitting the clip kind of on either side of that spot. I cut it out, and it automatically kind of stitches all that together, then the two sides on either side of that cut clip. And actually, this is not a bad editing program, although it is very simple. It does a really good job with cutting down. I think it's a little bit more complicated if you have to stitch multiple clips together, but that's also something that you could do. And right now what I'm doing is, like, I felt like this middle section of the video where I'm like, you know, foaming and foaming and foaming and foaming. It was too long, so I cut out a whole bunch of it. Just basically anywhere where I wasn't saying something or I wasn't showing something important, I just removed those bits. And that's it. That is the basics of it. Then I just exported this as a 1080p file, which you can do right from the menu. And I brought it into Canvas Studio and uploaded it into Canvas Studio. And then I embedded it without comments. And that's it. That's all it took from not really having a plan to finishing this entirely in about an hour.